Hey everybody, welcome. We're going to get started in just another minute. We're going to give people probably just 2 minutes to get into the room and get started. But thanks so much for being here today, and we'll get started in just a few. If you're just joining us, we're just giving everybody just another couple of minutes to get in. So thanks again for joining us. We're going to start in just a few minutes. Okay, we're going to go ahead and get started. Thanks everybody for joining us today. It's great to see some familiar faces who've been with us over the last few weeks as we've been doing these, as well as some new faces. We hope that everybody is staying healthy and sane in this time, and we hope that this brings you a little bit of relief during the time. So thanks again for joining us. I'm Amanda Garcia. I'm the Program Director for Digital Design, Public Relations, and Digital Media Marketing here at Tulane SOPA. And also today we have Professor Rebecca Carr, who's going to be joining us and doing half of the demonstration, and I'll be doing the other half. At the bottom of the screen here, you can follow us on Instagram and Facebook to learn a little bit more and see some of our fun students and what we do every day. If you have not downloaded the files for today's presentation, just a quick reminder, if you didn't see that email, you just go to our website /downloads, and then it should be the first thing you see at the top. There are 3 files for today, so if you are following along with us, there are 3 that you will need. We'll try to get through all of them, but if not, you can use them as sort of practice files later. So we are going to be recording this, and we will be sending you a link to our YouTube page to retrieve this recording in the next couple of days. So, you know, if we kind of get ahead of you, no problem, you know, don't panic. We will send this back out so you can re-practice this. Also, whenever we send you the link, you'll notice that the other seminars that we've done so far are there too if you want to review and look at those. That being said, we also will have the chat box open for questions. We have other faculty on the call with us today, and Samantha Barnes is waving hello, and they will be monitoring. She and Rebecca, or myself and Samantha, depending on who's talking, will be monitoring the chat. So please, any question that may come up, if you need us to clarify something, etc., we'd be more than happy to do that in the chat. And then we'll leave any kind of audible questions Samantha and I will ask based on what we see in the chat. We'll bring those up to whomever's speaking at the time. So if you could please put all questions in the chat, and then if it's something that we can't answer there, we'll ask the presenter to go back through. Okay, so some of you may have already seen this, so I'm going to go through this quickly, as we know we have a lot of repeat guests today. But in case this is your first time, I just wanted to talk about the difference between something like Adobe Illustrator and Adobe Photoshop. So Photoshop is a raster-based software application that's used for editing photos. Really, you shouldn't really be doing much else other than maybe building web files in Photoshop. Illustrator is where you're primarily going to live for any kind of layout, digital illustration for logos, branding, that sort of thing. And this is what we call vector image creation. And the reason that we love vector image creation, and you can see the differences here, the raster versus vector. So up here at the top, these first 2 Apple logos, you can see that this one has what we call, if you joined us last week, this looks familiar, many points along this vector path. And what that does is it allows us to scale up an object if it's in vector or drawn in a vector format as large as we want, and it won't lose image quality. So this is great if you're designing a logo that may be used on many, many applications, everything from a tiny little business card to maybe a tag on, on a t-shirt, whatever it might be. You want to be working in vector format. This over here on the far right is what happens whenever you scale up a raster image beyond what it needs to be scaled at. So it spreads out those pixels, right? It has a pixel depth or a pixel resolution, and it's only going to scale it up so much before you start losing resolution, right? It looks pixelated. You probably heard that term. So here at the very bottom, you can see the difference between vector versus raster, just in a simple circle or a simple dot. So once again, anything you're going to be using that will be reproduced for things like, I have some examples here for you. This is a poster that was done by a student, Keegan Krause. So this is a poster that's going to be very large. So these illustrations were done in Adobe Illustrator. That way it can be printed very, very big and not lose resolution. This is an illustration done in Illustrator of a really nice, beautiful line art of Leon's frozen custard in a really cool chromatic composition. And then you can also see we can get into a ton of detail. So this versus the last one that was very simplified, this has a ton more detail. So this once again was done in Adobe Illustrator. It can be scaled down or scaled up, and it won't lose resolution. And of course, like I mentioned before, logos are very important to be done primarily and almost exclusively in a vector image editing format such as Adobe Illustrator because of the many different applications you'll need for a logo. And lastly, you can also lay out things. This is a student proposed a menu design for Bywater American Bistro just for a class project, but she did everything from the illustrations themselves to the typesetting. So you can lay out pages within Adobe Illustrator. Typically, if you've heard of Adobe InDesign, that is for longer formats. So that's for everything from like a book to a magazine, multiple pages. If you just have a couple of pages, like a business card, a menu, a trifold brochure, those kinds of things are typically done in Adobe Illustrator as well. Okay, and with that, we're going to go ahead and get started. Hopefully everyone has had a chance to join us, and this is our website at the bottom here. Feel free to check it out. We have classes that are starting this summer, actually. So if you're interested, we are now enrolling for summer. So I'm going to stop sharing my screen quickly and go ahead and pull up the chat box so we can see it here. And I'm going to go ahead and launch Adobe Illustrator. So if you are going to be following along with us, let's go ahead and go into Illustrator and open up the file that says Pathfinder Tool. So I'm going to go ahead and share my screen. I'm going to share my whole desktop so you can see my tools here at the top. Okay, Sam, in the chat box, can you please let me know if you can see what I am sharing? That would be great. Okay, great. So I'm going to go ahead and minimize everybody's beautiful faces so I can see what we're working on. So you should all have the Pathfinder tools.ai over here is where you can see this file. It should look like this. I'll give you a second to do that. So as some of you are pulling this up, a couple of things I want to point out, just in case you did not join us for the last one, I do want to quickly review where to find your different toolbars. So the tools that we're going to be talking about primarily today will be your Pathfinder toolbox. I mean, that's really what we're focusing on. And all of your tools are located under the Window tab at the top. So if I'm talking about something and you're not really sure where to find that, under Window, you can probably find everything you need. So we're going to be working, like I said, with Pathfinder. So it is right here under Navigator. This is in alpha order. So if you click on Pathfinder, so once again, I just went up to Window and then Pathfinder. And this is what my Pathfinder box looks like. Please notice that there is a dark bar at the top of all your toolboxes. That means that you can click it and drag it around on that dark bar. Also notice there's a little X that does what you think it does, that closes it out, right? So anytime you see an X, our good graphical user interface, our good GUI tools, that just means to close it out. Over here, the three little bars, the little hamburger menu is more options. So if you see that within a different toolbox, that is just more options. Okay, and then over here we have our toolbar. Yours could look slightly different or a little bit more different than mine. It could be collapsed or, you know, long like this. Either way, it's the same thing. And that, once again, if you get lost, you can go up to here under toolbars and you can pull your toolbar. You may see the basic toolbar that looks like this. Either way, that's completely fine. And we're going to be using a few of these tools today, not too many. If you want to go into more, check out the previous Illustrator last week, I believe it was, that week before, everything's running together, am I right? That you can pull up and see all the different tools that we use. But I've already drawn the shapes for you for today in this specific document. When Professor Carr starts speaking, you may need to use the 5th tool down here. And notice, like we spoke about before, if you see this little triangle at the bottom of the tool, that just means if you hold it down that there's more options, right? So just to do that again, anywhere you see this little triangle, if you click and hold it down, you will be able to get more options. And then just as another reminder, if you see this little additional arrow all the way to the right, that is a tear off. So if I put my mouse over that and release, I can then tear off this little box and move it around. So one more time, I hold it down, I come all the way over here to the right and I release, and then I'm able to click on that dark area and move around my shapes. Also, when we're thinking about moving and clicking things, we talked last week about these 2 different selection tools. So the very top selection tool is our overall selection tool, right? The shortcut to get to that is by hitting the letter V as in Victor on your keyboard. And this will allow you to move, rotate, scale, etc. objects on your page. And then right below that is the direct selection tool. It's a white arrow versus a white outline with a black fill arrow. So this direct selection tool will allow you to directly select those points within an object. So we may not need that one today. Mostly we're going to be using your regular old selection tool as well as your shape tools. And the reason we wanted to have this seminar is so that you understand that there, you know, yes, the pen tool like we went over in the other workshop. And if you didn't watch that one, we definitely recommend it because it is such an important, vital tool to what we do every day. But if it seems really complex to you, or you're thinking there's got to be an easier way, well, there is, right? And we're going to give you a little insight into that today with this demonstration. So hopefully you all have the Pathfinder Tools.ai pulled up now. As we move through this, just a couple things to keep in mind. You will need to zoom in and zoom out pretty frequently. So if you look down at your keyboard and you hit either the control on if you're on a PC or the command if you're on a Mac, and you hold that down and you hit the plus key, that will allow you to zoom way in, or the minus key, and that will allow you to zoom out. Okay, so command plus will zoom you in, command minus will zoom you out. If you get zoomed in and you need to recenter yourself on the page, one way to do that is just to click the space bar. So when I click the space bar, my little hand icon comes up, and then I can hold down the space bar and I can click and drag to get over to what I want to see. So I want everybody to zoom in about where I am, hold down the space bar, and then see how the little hand looks like it grabs the page and moves it around. I've made my pointer tool very, very big. So yours is not going to look this big. This is just for demonstration purposes, okay? But whenever you click your space bar, it should give the little hand icon, and then you can click and drag. So what I would like you to do is zoom into where you see the first couple of tools here. Okay, so I think that's all the basics that we're going to need as we move through this. And then whenever Professor Carr takes over, I'm sure she'll review anything that I missed. So also don't forget, if you just opened your file, to go ahead and grab that Pathfinder tool. If you were in a class, I would ask you, where do I get the Pathfinder? But I can't hear you guys. So where do you get the Pathfinder? You go to Window and you go to Pathfinder. So Window, Pathfinder. There's also this 3-key shortcut, which doesn't seem much like a shortcut, to get the Pathfinder toolbox. So the quickest way probably is just Window, Pathfinder, and that will bring up your Pathfinder box. All right, so what I have done is given you a demonstration of what the primary tools within the Pathfinder box do. We're going to cover about 7 of them, and then the remainder of them we just don't have time to go through, but you can play around with those. But we're going to give you the ones that we use as design professionals every day to add to your overall Illustrator toolbox. Okay, I don't see any questions right now, so I'm going to keep going. Once again, if we're going too fast or you need help, please put your questions over in the chat bar. Okay, so the way that we build complex shapes, a quicker way and maybe sometimes a little easier is, other than the Bezier pen tool, is by combining shapes, right? So here's our shape palette, which once again was over here, where you probably see a rectangle, hold it down, tear it off, okay? Is by using simple shapes and then combining those shapes. So last week we learned how to use the pen tool. So for example, if I wanted to draw this arrow with the pen tool, I would sort of, have to like visualize it in my mind's eye. I'd have to come through here with my pen tool. You can see that it's, oh, I didn't quite make it. Okay, so I'm going to come through here and adjust it. This looks like a really, really bad arrow. Well, it's not too bad. It's off center. Okay, so it's a little cattywampus, not very precise, right? So here's the thing. Illustrator already has a built-in triangle and a built-in rectangle. So why am I trying to draw this by hand when those shapes already exist? Okay. So if you are within a tool and you need to get out of that tool, all you have to do is hit escape and it will get you out of that tool. Just hit escape and or go back over here on your toolbar to the selection tool. Okay, so I'm gonna hit delete to get rid of what I just did. Okay, so once again, escape should get you out, or you can click on the selection tool. Okay, so what I would like you to do is to see how all of these different shapes, all these different tools are going to help us make shapes, right? So anytime you're entering in, like we talked about, using the pen tool or creating a shape, we need to have something in mind that we want to create ahead of time, okay? So typically when you're making these shapes, you kind of have something in your mind's eye that you want to make. So we talked a minute ago about trying to make an arrow perfectly. That can be really difficult. So what I've done here is use a rectangle and a triangle, and I'm showing you blue and red making purple. Okay, so I'm trying to give you a little visual clue here. So blue and red, this is my then arrow going over here to purple. So what I've done is I've made a blue rectangle, a red triangle, and I'm going to unite those shapes. So right here in our shape modes, if you hover over each of these, it will tell you what they do. And this is true for any, dialog box, any little window within Illustrator, Photoshop, or InDesign. So if I hover over this first shape, it says unite, okay? So if I want to combine two shapes, all I need to do is create the shapes, right? So I can show you how to do that and you can play later. So if I click on my rectangle tool, I'm making that rectangle shape. And then there's a couple of ways that I could actually make a triangle, but here under my, let's say, star tool, I can click on my star, or I can click on my polygon, let's say, and click on the screen. And I'm gonna tell it that I only want 3 sides because that's gonna make a triangle, all right? And then once I have my triangle, I can hold down Shift so it doesn't skew, right? If I hold down Shift, it makes it proportionate. And then I can just rotate it and I can move it where I want it, okay? So we can get into this a little bit more later, but for right now, and Rebecca's gonna go over the actual creating the shapes. I wanna show you what the Pathfinder tool actually does. So you can kind of mess around with this later, okay? But once you have made the shapes that you want, you just highlight both of those shapes. And to do that, over here on your tool palette, I'm just selecting my main selection tool. It's the black pointer tool. It's the main selection tool at the top. And I'm drawing an invisible box. You see how when I click and drag with my selection tool, it makes like this little marching ants, this little dotted line, pretend box. I'm not actually drawing anything, right? It just makes a clear selection area. So if I just click and drag and select, I don't even have to drag around the whole thing. Notice I'm not doing this. Okay, I'm not actually selecting the whole object. You don't have to. You can, but you don't have to. I'm literally just selecting a piece of each of these, and Illustrator will know that, hey, we want to select these 2 different things. So I'm just dragging a little bit on each, and now you'll notice that there is a bounding box, a blue bounding box around both shapes, and now I know that those 2 things are selected. Okay, so once again, just to review, you go to your selection tool, you are creating an invisible selection box, right? So I'm just clicking and dragging, selecting pieces and parts of the objects on the page. Once again, you do not have to make a full selection on the object. You do not have to do that. You can, but sometimes you have objects that are close to one another. Like if I had these two arrows kind of close to one another and I just wanted to select these two shapes and I'm trying to pull this bounding box, it's gonna keep getting this shape underneath it. So Illustrator will allow you to just select two pieces and it will only grab those, if that makes sense, okay? So I've selected those two pieces. So go ahead and do that. Click on your black selection tool, select your blue and red. And then over here, I'm gonna click on Unite, okay? And then you're gonna click on Unite and notice that it creates a united shape. Okay, so I'm gonna Command Z. I'm gonna undo that, Command Z. All right, I'm gonna do it one more time. So with my selection tool, we're not gonna spend this much time on every one. I just wanna make sure that you guys are clear. I'm going to select both objects and go over here to Unite. Okay, so that's the first one. Now I'm gonna scroll up, or you can hold on the space bar and drag. Okay. Now, a moon or a crescent shape is very popular for us here in New Orleans, right? But we may need this for, let's say, something else. So any two shapes, you can subtract the shape that is on top. So notice I have two shapes here. I have two circles, okay? Now, I knew I wanted to draw a moon. So I know that if I have a full circle, I need to subtract a smaller circle to get this shape. So once you understand what you can do with the Pathfinder palette, then you can start to envision the types of things that, and Rebecca's going to show you some really fun illustration ways to use these. So my red, as you can see right here, if I zoom in, you can see that my red is on top of my blue circle, right? It's on top, so it's going to subtract, it's going to basically cut through that red circle, cutting through the blue circle, okay? You don't have to make this shape, I've already made it for you. All I'm going to do is go to my selection tool, select both shapes. Once again, I don't have to make a full box. I'm just selecting the two here. And then my second here is minus. See, it says minus front. So it's going to delete the front from the back, and that's how I get this crescent shape. All right. So if you want to move the red circle around just to see what it's going to do, you know, like I could barely take it out. So if I move my shape on top over here, I select both and then I go to minus, I'm going to get this little funny looking Pac-Man sort of shape. Okay. So depending on what you want to do, so Command Z or Control Z to undo. I knew that I wanted a moon, so I placed it somewhere around here. Select both of your selection tool. I'm only on my selection tool right now. I'm not making any shapes. If any of you are clicked on a shape tool accidentally, like if you click on the square and then you make, let's say, a rectangle or a square, and then you keep clicking, you're gonna just keep making more and more rectangles, right? To get out of that, you wanna hit escape, go back over here to your selection tool. Now I'm out of that tool and I can select these guys and just hit delete. So once again, if you just keep making stars, okay, and you can't get out of this, go back over here to your selection tool to get out of the tool. You're getting out of your tool that you were just in. I'm gonna drag a selection area around those and just hit delete to get rid of it. It's easy to get stuck inside of these drawing tools, I agree, okay? So if you get stuck in any tool, you just come back over here to your selection tool, or like I said earlier, the shortcut for that is the letter V as in Victor. So if I'm making stars and I click V, it will automatically take me to my selection tool and I can get rid of it, okay? Okay, so far we've reviewed what happens, how we unite shapes with the first one. Secondly, how we subtract the top from the bottom. Next, we're gonna use something called the intersect. This is one of my favorites. So sometimes making a shield, right, in this case could be kind of tricky because you want these curves to be very similar. Notice that I have 3 identical circles that I've just copied and pasted here. And I want to get this space where they all intersect here in the center. So I've made 3 circles. You don't need to do this. I'm just showing you. You can play with this later. And then I'm selecting them with the selection tool. And then I'm clicking the third tool here, which is intersect. and it will save that center area in which they all intersect. So this is a fun, you can play with this later. I'm gonna start moving through these a little bit quicker for time, but you can see that once again, you select them all, use the third tool, intersect. So, you know, depending on kind of where these circles are placed, you know, I could have them like that. And then I just wanna barely select them all and then intersect, and I'm gonna get a really different shape, okay? But I moved them in such a way that gave me these beautiful curves on all sides. Okay, yes, like a moon pie, that's right. Okay, so excluding shapes. So my background, I set my background to yellow, like a rectangular or square background, so you can see what's happening. So for excluding, right, what it's going to do, instead of saving what's in the middle, it's gonna take away, because here we saved what was in the middle, we saved the shape. For excluding, it's gonna remove what's in the middle. So if you notice, if I move this around, this triangle is now cut out of the circle. So this is super handy if you need a vector shape or a logo, whatever, right? Like I feel like this could be a logo for Fisher Price or something. And you need to be able to see the background through that shape, right? This is a super duper duper handy tool. So if I have this yellow background, I need this, let's say we can't get this to be the right shade of yellow, let's say, or let's say this is a photograph and we need to be able to see through this purple shape to the photograph. Once again, this is all I have right now is a circle. I put a triangle on top, right? I am going to select, so let me show you another way to select. So if I'm with my selection tool and I click and drag to get these two, what's happening? I'm now selecting all three shapes. If I'm dragging this invisible selection box, there's no way if I'm dragging to get just these two shapes, because then I'm just gonna start dragging the yellow. I could move the yellow, but you know, it becomes a nightmare. So another way to select multiple shapes with your selection tool is to click on the first shape. It doesn't matter which one, it can be on the top or bottom. Then you hold down the shift key and you select the other shape and then release the shift key. Okay, I'm gonna do it again. I'm just on my selection tool, nothing different than we've been doing. I'm just gonna click one time on one of the objects, doesn't matter which one, front or back. I'm gonna hold down shift. I'm gonna put my shift key down and I'm gonna click on the other object. So now if I released my shift key and I click and move, I'm moving those two objects together. That's how I know they're both selected. Then I come to my fourth tool here, which is exclude, and that's how I am getting the object excluded. Okay, so if that was a little too quick for you, feel free to review the video later. Okay, so Command minus, let's zoom out, Command minus. Hold down that space bar. I'm gonna get you over here to the top. We're gonna go through a couple of more. So once again, Command minus or Control minus to zoom out. Use that space bar to pan around your page to get over here. And then Command plus, let's get back in a little closer. I'm gonna zoom out a little bit more. Okay, so dividing shapes. Okay, so earlier we were looking at outline shapes. Now I'm gonna show you using these bottom, just the first couple for time's sake, what happens when we divide shapes. So when I have multiple circles here and I select them all, it will then, I'm just gonna show you using my direct selection tool, I'm gonna hold that down, it will divide everywhere. It basically cuts. This is probably my most used tool for Pathfinder. I'm gonna show you why in a second. So when I have overlapping shapes and I've hit the divide key, which is this very first one here, you see how it's kind of showing you in the little demo, how all those in the little image here, how all those little squares are now cut into individual pieces. So anywhere the shapes overlap, it will create a cut. So notice this is a piece, this is a piece, this is a piece. We're like exploding a beach ball, okay? So now here's my little shield I had earlier, but now I also have all of these other pieces, okay? So this could be super important if I'm trying to show like what colors look like when they're intersecting and I wanna control that perhaps, or let's say that I've got this, I'm just Command Z to undo. If I got this cool thing and I wanna crop like a picture inside of this shape and I wanna keep this a color and I wanna have another image cropped in this shape, I can now use this fun little graphic that I've made in different ways, okay? All right, so feel free to go back and review that if you need to. Okay, so I'm just panning down, I'm holding on the spacebar key. So trimming is the second one here. This is another one that we use a lot. So let's say that you work for a company and you need to do some sort of typesetting. and you can't quite match the typeface, or you like this typeface, but the serifs and the finials on this crossbar of the T are just too long. Like this is just bothering you. And you think that the serifs here on the side, once again, are just too long. What you can do is I've just gone in here and created a rectangle and covered up the areas that I don't want, right? I'm just covering them up. That's all. They're just shapes and I'm just putting them on top, okay? And then I just, once again, select them all with my selection tool. And then I come over here to trim, okay? When I hit trim, you'll notice that now, see right here, you can see when I select this, you can see the blue serif through this, right? You can see it through here. When I click on trim, those go away. Check it out, okay? So they no longer exist. I go back to my white pointer tool, my direct selection, and I can move these away, and then see that it's trimmed it. Okay. Last but not least, the one I'm going to show you is merging the shapes. So if I have these 3 shapes, and what I decide to do is over here on the merge tool, I click merge, it is going to trim them all, but also keep the shapes. So it is not getting rid, oops, I haven't grouped. It is not getting rid of the red triangle like we did earlier. It's keeping the red triangle, but it's just inside of the circle and it's cutting the circle through. So imagine that as sort of like punching through all the different shapes, okay? Okay, so that's just a quick demo of the tools we're gonna use today. I'm just zooming out. Let's go ahead and open up the Pathfinder Demo AI. We're gonna move this along a little bit. And what I wanna show you is a real world application of some of the tools that we just did. Okay, awesome. So here, if you wanna go ahead and open up, I'm gonna give you guys just one more second to open up Pathfinder Demo AI that you downloaded. I'm gonna read the chat box. I'm gonna give you 30 seconds to open up this file while I read the chat. Yes, so if you were typing in text, which we're gonna do here, I'm gonna show you how to convert it to outlines, Meredith. I think that might be what you're asking about. I'm gonna show you that in a second. And Mr. Strain is still having issues with the rectangle. So if you're clicking on this rectangle tool, is that the issue? You're clicking on the rectangle tool and you're just making rectangles. If that's the case, you wanna come back over here to your selection tool, and then you should be able to move on to a new tool. Okay, so hopefully everyone has this Pathfinder.demo open. Okay, so I'm gonna go ahead and Command+ to zoom in. And so this is something that we use, this divide. Remember I told you I use the divide a lot. This is one way that I use it quite frequently, is that when I'm typesetting, I'm gonna zoom in real close. You don't have to do this, I'm just gonna show you. When I'm typesetting something, let's say this is a headline, I want to make, I love doing this, I like to make my words interact more. So there's some visual interaction, right, between the typography. So I love to make my letters look like they're looping inside of one another. So if I want this F to look like it's catching the bottom shoulder of the D, like it's looping inside of the D, I could use the divide tool to do that. So real quick, one thing that I think Meredith was asking is how do I get my text to work like a shape? So real quick, I'll go over that. So if I'm going to type some text here, okay, so just type out some text if you want to follow along, otherwise review this later. Once I've typed out my text, I can go back to my selection tool. I can hold down Shift to scale it up. And then up here, I can go up to Type, Create Outlines, okay? And what that's going to do is it's going to convert my text from actual live text, is what we call text that you can edit, to a shape. So once I've done that, if I zoom in really close and I go here, now you can see that this text is editable, okay? Don't ever do this for real. To text, you don't want to alter text, okay? I just want to show you that this is what I've done. I've created a monster, just kidding. I've created what's called outlines of text, okay? So once again, I typed it out, right? I put in, whoops, now we're on a whole nother topic. I've typed in something, I've gone to my selection tool, I've gone up here, type, create outlines. And now what happens is I have type that is now an object. Okay, so once I have these two objects, what do I need to do? I just select them with my selection tool, and I come to my divide tool. And when I do that, I want to zoom in to show you what's happening. Anywhere that the letters were touching, right? I've made these different colors. It doesn't do this for you. I've made them different colors in this demonstration to show you what happened. So anywhere that the world is overlapping the word beautiful, it is now divided that into individual pieces and bits, right? So once it's done that, and once you've done that, you can go to your white pointer tool over here, your direct selection tool, and you can just click one time and you can directly select all these different pieces. I could take this piece out completely if I wanted to, right? I could have a void if I wanted to. But anywhere, and you can also edit the shape. So anywhere that it's overlapped, it has created these little pieces and parts. So then what I can do is I can select those pieces and parts and change the color, alter the color to where it matches the rest of the shape. So whereas before, up here at the beginning, my F was on top of the D, I've divided it. So now that part that's still technically on top, it was just pink, right? I can now, with my direct selection tool, what I've done is gone to my, over here, my eyedropper, and I have eyedropped that orange. And I go back to my selection tool. So now with that one little change, it looks like, I'm gonna zoom out, Command minus, it looks like my F is now looping through my D. So this is just a real world application of how to use the divide tool, okay? And lastly, and we're not gonna get into this, I'm gonna let you do this later, but I want you to create a wrench, okay? So I've made this little wrench for you out of these 5 shapes, okay? So using these 5 shapes, how would you create this wrench using your different Pathfinder tools? I want you to think about it. And what I've done is I've locked this for you, and I've provided you the different pieces here so you can sort of lay them into where you think they go, right? Command Z, to put them wherever you think they go, and then how from this point would you then create the wrench? So this is something that you can play with later. We need to move on so that we can get into the fun part of this. And I'm gonna turn it over to Professor Rebecca Carr, and she's gonna take you through creating another object. So in the future, feel free to play with that wrench. If you have any issues, let us know and we can try to help you resolve.
Okay, thank you, Dr. Garcia. I'm gonna share my screen now. And can I get a thumbs up if you all see it, including the top bar? Okay, great. All right, so I want to have everyone open the robot.eps file. Just go ahead and file, open, and pull it up. And I'll give everyone a couple minutes. And there's just 2 identical robots on the page. And what we're going to do is use one just to look at and one to trace over. Okay, so our first step, this will kind of be something that Corey mentioned in the last demo, is we want to, right now I have this layer, all the robots on a layer that is locked. We want to start a new layer so that we can work on top of these robots without having them get in our way and move around. So I'm just going to click this little hamburger menu on the layers panel and hit new layer, and I'm going to call this working layer and say okay. So as you can see, I want y'all to work on the layer on top of the gray robots, which is locked. Okay, just as Dr. Garcia said, just as a reminder to move around your document, hold down spacebar to pan, and it just helps you get to where you need to go, and to zoom in and out, Command plus, Command minus. Okay, and then just make sure, you probably do from the last demo, make sure everybody has the Pathfinder tool out. That's the one that we're going to be using the most, Window Pathfinder, to get it. So what we're going to do is we're going to start with the face of this little robot. I'm going to zoom in so I can see it, and let's draw the eyes first, okay? The eyes are going to be made up of 2 shapes, a circle and a triangle. So what we're going to do is we're going to make it a color. We're going to make the eyes a color so we can see it when we're tracing above this. So if you guys remember from last time on our main tool palette, the top kind of outlined thing is called a stroke, and that's the line around a shape. And then the one that right now has the X through it is the fill. So for the eyes, I don't want a stroke, I want a fill. There's two things you can do. You can use this little arrow to swap it. So now I have a fill and no stroke. And then I'm going to go into the swatches palette. If you guys don't see your swatches palette, same thing, go under window, pull down swatches. You can also hit F5. And you should have a bunch of colors that you can choose from. For the sake of this demo, I'm going to make our robot's eyes yellow. So I'm just going to hit the yellow. And so now if you can look over on my main toolbar, it's a yellow fill. So I'm going to go over to our shape panel, and I also have it pulled out. So either way, you can either pull it out this way or, you know, have it pulled out. And I'm going to pull the ellipse tool. So the ellipse tool is what I'm going to use to make a circle. So when you want to make a perfect circle, you hold down Shift and just draw out. If I wanted to make an oval, you guys don't have to do this, but just for the sake of a demo, I'm not holding down Shift, and you see how it's not a perfect circle. I'm going to just delete that. So I drew my circle just by holding down Shift, and I'm just kind of lining it up to where the eye is. Now the next shape I want to do is to make the little triangle, which is kind of the eyelashes for the robot. So I'm going to click on the polygon tool and just double click it, and the sides, sometimes the default is 5. I'm going to choose 3 just because the triangle has 3 sides. Okay, and it's going to make this giant triangle for me. I just zoomed in and out, just a reminder, Command minus, Command plus, and I'm going to go back to my selection tool or hit V and just hold down the side, pull one of the side corners and hold down Shift so it'll scale proportionally and make the triangle smaller. And then I'm just going to move it over to near where her little eye is and size it to where it looks like a good eyelash. And I'm moving it on top. So now I have 2 shapes. They look okay. You can't really see that they're not one, but let's make them one solid shape. So like Dr. Garcia said, I'm just using the selection tool. I'm holding down Shift. I selected the triangle and now the circle. And now I'm just going to use the Unite tool. I'm just going to hit Unite and boom, they're one shape. See, they're not 2 shapes anymore. They're one shape. Now, since she has 2 eyes, we could go through that whole thing again, but we can also just either copy and paste, Command C, Command V, or one really easy way to do is just hold down Option and drag, and then when you release, like unclick your mouse, and then you have a duplicate. So either way, Command C, Command V, or use the Option and drag. And so now your robot has 2 eyes. Okay, so next let's make our mouth. Our mouth is slightly more complicated. So we're going to use we're going to essentially be making a rectangle, but this rectangle we want to have curved edges, right? So we're going to use the rounded rectangle tool. So I'm going to click on that. But for this one, I actually do want a stroke because I do want the stroke for basically the lips and the teeth. So I'm going to go in here and I'm going to switch it so my stroke is on top, not my fill. And just so she doesn't have a yellow mouth, I'm going to go ahead and choose a dark gray. Okay, so the stroke, no fill, just stroke on the rounded rectangle, and I'm just going to draw a rounded rectangle on top of where the mouth is. I think this stroke looks a little thin compared to the one that we're drawing. So up here at the top panel, this is, you know, optional. I'm going to change it to like a 3-point stroke, just so it's a little bit thicker. Now, if I look at it, it's not quite the same, not quite as rounded as the one in the illustration that we're tracing. Do you see these 2 little dots that look like little eyeballs? Just click on them and move, and it'll round your shape out a little bit. So see, when I did that, it kind of rounded it. So I'll just move it along. And now it looks a little more like a pill-like shape. So we have the outline of her robot lips, I guess. And now I'm going to make the teeth. And so for the teeth, I'm just going to draw some simple strokes. I'm going to hold down Shift just so it'll be straight. And I'm just going to draw 1, 2, 3. Again, I'm just using the line tool, drawing, holding down Shift to keep it straight, and drawing all my lines. Just a little pro tip, if you didn't exactly get them traced on the right place on your robot and you want to make sure they're even, you can go up to this cool little tool here, Align. It's also one of your panels, Align, and just distribute, and it'll just make sure they have equal space in between all of them. So now holding down Shift, okay, I'm gonna hold down Shift. I should have all my lines connected, and I'm holding down my lips. So I'm gonna use now the divide tool, and when I hit that, the teeth are divided into the mouth. And so like you can see, if I move it around, it's just one complete shape. Now, since her teeth aren't, I don't want her teeth to be clear, now I'm gonna go in and I'm gonna pull the fill up and I'm just gonna make it white. I'll give you guys, anyone needs a second to catch up. And feel free to make a slightly different kind of robot features if you want. All right, so now I've got eyes and I've got a mouth on our robot. And so now I think I'm gonna draw the head, and just let's get this all complete. So I'm gonna, just to make, again, for the sake of the demo, I'm gonna choose a color for my robot that isn't gray, so it'll be easier to see. So I'm gonna make my robot bright pink, and I'm gonna make sure she doesn't have a stroke around her, because I just want a solid fill. So I've got pink as my color, and I'm gonna go over to my, my shapes, and I'm gonna choose the rectangle tool. In this case, her head is a rectangle that it doesn't have curves, so I'm just going to drag and draw until I get one. So you guys should just have a pink rectangle on your robot's head. So as you can see now, we don't see the eyes and we don't see the mouth. So all we have to do now is basically what we wanna do is send this rectangle to the back. So you can say Object, Arrange, Send to Back. There's also key commands, Command Shift, and then the little brackets. But Object, Arrange, Send to Back. So now the rectangle's in the back and the eyes and mouth are in the front. So let's do the ears next. The ears are just made up of some, again, some really simple shapes. So I'm gonna go back, I'm gonna stay on the pink fill because it'll be the same color as her head. And I'm just gonna draw another little rectangle for the, let's call it like the base of her robot ear. And then a circle. This is made up of a circle. So I'll just go back to my ellipse tool. Again, remember to hold down Shift so you get a more perfect circle. And I'm just going back to my selection tool to move it around. So that's 2 parts of her ear. And if I want at this stage, I can unite them. So I'll just hit the Unite button. And so now this is the shape I have. Then I'll go and make another, go back to the ellipse tool and make another little circle for this antenna part of the ear, holding down Shift. And then for this, I could either make a stroke, but just for the sake of merging them easier, I'm just gonna make a super skinny little rectangle for the base of the antenna. So now what I wanna do is make sure these are all one shape. So I'm gonna select the ball part, the rectangle, and this shape, and I'm going to unite them. So now I have basically one unit. Now, again, she has 2 ears. So there's a couple different ways you could do this. Remember, Command C, Command V, copy, paste, or just hold down Option, drag, and release. I could just turn it around. You can kind of like make a little arrow thing, or you can go to Object, Transform. This is probably the easiest. Reflect. So this means I'm just going to flop it the opposite. I want to reflect it vertically, say OK, and now it's going the opposite direction. And I'm just going to stick it here. But again, you can also just turn by using getting it, kind of dragging your cursor to where you get those shapes and just merging it around. Also remember, just a reminder, when you make a mistake, Command Z, you can undo it and go back to where you want to be. Okay, so now our robot has a face, a whole head and a face, and we're going to just continue with the other shapes. So for the neck, we're really just going to, it's supposed to look kind of like a little moving up and down spring. So I'm going to go back to the rounded rectangle tool and just draw some kind of pill-like shapes.
Hey, Rebecca.
Yes.
For some people are saying they don't have the rounded rectangle tool, if they have a different toolbar or a different version of Illustrator. Can you show them if you just use the rectangle tool? just the plain rectangle tool, how you'll still get those little shapes. If you just draw the regular rectangle, you'll still get those little dots inside. And then you can still pull the little dots. Yeah, just to show them how to use the regular rectangle things.
Yeah, so now it becomes the pill. Did you guys see that? You want me to do it again? So yeah, you just take the regular rectangle tool and you still get those little, I'm calling them smiley face dots, and you just pull them inward and they become the pill shape.
Thank you.
Okay, so once I have, I'll give you guys a second to kind of make one. But for this, it's going to be really simple. I'm just going to duplicate this same shape over and over again until I get the springs of the neck. So I'm holding down Option, I'm dragging, and then I'm releasing my, my finger from the Option and the cursor, the mouse. Release, release, and I want them to kind of overlap a tiny bit. Now it looks like this is a place where I could use that Align tool again. It looks like I didn't do a wonderful job. They look like they're slanting a little bit. What I could do here is I could go in and make sure they're at least all lining up to one edge. And you see what it did? It just shifted them so they all line up. Okay, and then once I have them selected, again, by holding down Shift, I'm going to use our good old Unite tool, hit Unite, and now you see they're just one shape. And if I wanted, I could also select our head shape and holding down Shift and the neck and hit Unite, and it's going to merge those two together. Now, do y'all remember what would I do? Would I bring it to back? Because my eyes and mouth didn't go away. They just went behind this. So Object, Arrange, Send to back. So here they are again. Okay, so now we're going to make the body. And the body is really just a half, the basic part of the body is just half of a circle. So I'm going to go back to the ellipse tool. I'm going to hold down Shift again because I do want it to start with a perfect circle. I'm going to hold down the V just to be able to move it around, and I'm just going to make sure it's about the same shape as the one from the illustration. So there's the body, but I don't want the bottom part. So what I'm going to do is I'm putting the fill on top because I'm about to make a change. Okay, I'm going to make a yellow rectangle. Now the yellow, I'm just going to make it yellow because we're going to get rid of it. And I just want y'all to see when we get rid of it. So I'm going to go over here and I'm going to choose the rectangle tool, and I'm going to draw a big rectangle. And now I'm going to go back to my selection, or hit V. I'm going to select the rectangle and the circle, hold down Shift, and I'm going to do this one, the minus front. So what it's going to do is it's going to cut off the one in front, which is my yellow rectangle. Boop. And so now we just have the half of circle. Okay, so our robot is getting here. Now we're going to make the arms, and the arms are also made out of a circle, but this time there's two cuts. So I'm going to go back to the ellipse tool again, hold down Shift because we want it to stay the same size. And I'm just going to kind of bring it over just to make sure it's about the same size as what I have. This doesn't have to be exact. Your arms can be a little different, but let's say that's about the right size circle. So now I'm going to draw another circle that we're going to cut off again. For the sake of being able to see it, I'm going to make it yellow again. Make sure I'm on my circle, hold down Shift, and just kind of make a circle that's going to give me, look at kind of the width of these arms. I'm just going to kind of estimate about this width. And I'm just going to kind of center it. If I really want to make sure it's centered, I can again use the Align tools just to make sure it shifts into shape. Okay, and now I'm just going to select both of them again by holding down Shift. And I'm going to do the minus front, and it makes like a donut. So now I'm going to make another rectangle. Now I basically want to cut my donut in half to make we just want the top part of the circle for her arms. So I'm going to hit the yellow for my fill, make another rectangle, hold down, just size it so it fits over that, hold V, and then select my donut, select my circle and select my rectangle, same thing, minus front. And so now I have the shape that will be her arms. So I'm just going to kind of line it up here. So there are her arms. Okay, so I'm gonna zoom in, and now I just need to make her little wrists, which should be pretty simple. It's not exact, but you know, as long as you have it basically the right shape. I'm gonna use the regular rectangle tool and just draw a little box. And then for the little claw hand, I wanna do the same thing that I did for this shape. And you know what, as just a quick little thing to make it faster, what I can do, since I haven't merged this with anything, is I could take it and using option, drag, unclick, just duplicate it and resize it so it's smaller and use that here. So now she has one little claw hand. Just kind of line it up. And so now I can use, it's time for me to use my merge tool again. I can merge, so I'm just hitting the claw hand, I'm hitting the little wrist and the arm, and I'm gonna hit unite. Well, actually, I'm gonna undo that because I should have moved it over to the other hand. So I'll just unite the claw hand and the wrist, only unite, and then move them over to the other side so she has two hands. And now we'll do the same thing, just holding down shift on all that and uniting. And so now her arms and her hands are connected, and we can do the same thing with the body. So now that's all one shape. Okay, almost done with this robot. The last thing is just making another donut. So quickly holding down shift, making the ellipse, solid shape, move it in here. I'm going to change my fill quickly to yellow. Oop, unclick. Changing it to yellow and making a smaller donut in here. And just kind of lining it up as close to the center. Holding down both with shift and minus front. And then very simply, just a little rectangle for the connection. And we can hold down shift and select both of those and unite them, and then unite it with the robot. And so there we have a robot just built with shapes that are merged together. So
great.
feel free to just play around, make your own robot. And
that's awesome. Thank you, Rebecca. Appreciate it.
Sure.
That's great. Okay, cool. If you want to stop sharing your screen,
sure.
We'll see everybody's beautiful faces. Thank y'all so much for joining us. I feel like we're always cutting this so close.
Yes.
Maybe we should extend these by half an hour. Thank you so much again for joining us today. I know things are a little crazy right now, and we do appreciate you taking the time to be here with us. Just looking over here for next week, I'm going to go ahead and share my screen quickly with you here. So you can see coming up, we have 4 design principles to live by. So we're moving away from software, and we're going more over the next 2 weeks into design tips. So if you're interested in design or want to know more about ways to improve your design techniques, April 29th and May 6th are really focusing on using design principles. We're going to show you a ton of great examples. And then we're also going to have May 6th about typography, which is basically using fonts and what that means. And then we're moving into Adobe XD. So if you're interested in building an app or what that kind of looks like in the real world, Professor Samantha Barnes, who's on this call, is going to be helping with that one. And then also we're going to get into Procreate. So if you're interested in Procreate, and drawing on the iPad, kind of what we're doing today, but freehand, right? That's coming up on May 20th. So we hope that you guys will join us for those fabulous events. You do need to register for each one individually, unfortunately. So if you can join us, we'd love to see you. Please feel free to put any other questions into the chat. Thanks, Stacy. It was good to see you. Thanks, Tara. And feel free, and we'll circle back with an email with a link. Bye, guys. Have a good rest of your day.